Hey everyone.
Hello, good morning. Thank you for having us. Welcome to the summit. Thank you for joining us for a presentation to talk about decarbonizing supply chains and what role blockchain can play in improving the current state of carbon emissions accounting. My name is Linda Jirouskova. I'm a corporate engagement manager with RMI's Climate Intelligence Program. As part of the work that we do within this program, we look at increasing emissions visibility, transparency, and improving accounting. And our specific focus is on hard-to-abate industrial sectors. I'll leave it to Charles for his intro.
Thanks, Linda. It's great to be with you all today. Thanks again to Alan and Protocol Labs for having us. My name's Charles Cannon. I'm a manager on our climate intelligence team, and I coordinate our carbon accounting efforts across those different industrial sectors. So in addition to improving carbon accounting in general and how it's done, we need to go into heavy industrial sectors and work out some nuance. And I just add the caveat that we're here in our capacity as sustainability experts, not as blockchain experts, but are so grateful to be a part of this conversation with you all over these next 2 days.
So as Charles just said, we're sustainability and climate-focused people. So I'll start us off with some climate data. Maybe painting a little bit of a bleak picture, but hopefully that will inspire us for action. So bottom line, we have 8 years to cut global emissions in half, and we're not on track. I'll pause there for that to sink in. When we look at our carbon budget, the total amount of emissions that we can release into the atmosphere to keep the temperatures from rising above 1.5 degrees Celsius, we are lacking in progress to maintain this current carbon budget that we have. And what it means is that it could have pretty significant impacts on the way we live. You have, I'm sure most of you in this room have seen different reports, different ways of summarizing this impact, but really, we could see significant migration due to climate change and people being displaced from where they live. We can see damage to infrastructure from rising sea levels. We are also estimating to see significant amount of climate-related deaths, again, from the impacts of climate change. In our work at RMI and within the Climate Intelligence Program, we primarily focus on industrial sectors because those sectors both play a key role in contributing to climate change and releasing emissions, as well as they can play a role in mitigating the impact and helping to kind of slow down the impact. So just to throw in a few numbers, currently the 7 heavy emitting sectors contribute about 30% of global carbon emissions. That's a pretty significant amount. I spoke earlier about that carbon budget. If these sectors continue to operate the way they are right now, we're expected to overshoot that carbon budget by 20% by 2030. So again, pretty significant impact. And the biggest challenge within these sectors are the supply chains. A lot of the companies, they can control, they have relatively good understanding of where they are with their own operations, with their own emissions at their factories, at their assets. But what's much more difficult is what's happening elsewhere in the supply chain, whether it is upstream, where they get their raw materials from, or downstream as their products move farther down to the consumers. Some of you might say, well, there's a lot of work already being done on this, which is true. We see everyday news around new coalitions being built, new targets being set. Companies are signing up for their SBTi targets. There are cases being brought to court about high emitters, which is great. All of that we welcome, we want to see that. But really, when we look at the impact today and where we are, we're not seeing meaningful, measurable impact in decarbonizing supply chains. So we need to do more. There are many challenges, but I'll highlight just a few when it comes to decarbonizing supply chains and reporting on the carbon emissions. First of all, there are many different reporting mechanisms. Again, all with good intentions, all doing part of the work. But the challenge is that most of them use estimation. They're not using primary data. And by that, obviously, we're getting to imperfect information because we're really not looking at the actual real-time primary data. Also, as you can imagine, some of the supply chains that we work on, they're super complex. There's so many different actors in them. You may have dozens, hundreds, sometimes thousands of different actors that are contributing to the development of the final product that a consumer sees. So transferring data in between them and making sure the data is accurate and it can be trusted is a challenge. And in some ways, probably the biggest point is, we're in 21st century, but the methods that are used for this reporting are pretty old school. We're looking at PDFs, Excel spreadsheets that might be uploaded to a database, passed from one actor to another. But ultimately, we're just looking at files that are being passed around with time delay.
So what would it look like to realize the next generation of carbon accounting and emissions reporting? And really resonated with a lot of the points that Alan laid out in his keynote of how can we have emissions data that is based more on primary data, directly measured or modeled information that is carried through our supply chain. Emissions factors have their utility and are going to continue to be around. We're not going to have sensors on everything overnight, but how can we work to define at least how much primary data we can represent with supply chain emissions today and improve that over time? How can we make sure that emissions reporting is comparable across industries or industrial sectors? If you're going to produce a phone or a car and you have options in your material selection, how can you be sure that the Excel spreadsheets that you're receiving have been calculated on comparable methods, right? Indeed, we want to be able to compare apples and oranges here. And lastly, how can we avoid the crutch or the atlas scenario of Excel spreadsheets in the next generation of emission reporting? How can emissions reporting be verified, smart, and digital first? And so really appreciative of Alan giving that primer on carbon accounting. It's not the most exciting topic because right now nobody goes to jail if you get it wrong, unlike financial accounting. But we'll just go a little bit deeper into detail on the various levels and how our work is trying to bring a level of clarity at the product level where information is so readily exchanged between companies. So the broadest and most ambitious aspect of reporting is also one of the newest, national level carbon accounting that launched on the heels of the Paris Agreement and NDCs. Corporate carbon accounting has existed for almost 2 decades at this point, but the use of it is changing from maintaining corporate license to operate or demonstrating corporate responsibility to really being able to make meaningful product declarations and adjustments against Scope 3 emissions targets that companies are beginning to make. An asset level is the most tangible and understandable level of emissions reporting because you have a site boundary, you have some operations, you have some smokestacks, you can measure against that. The challenge is going from this asset both up and down on these levels, but specifically our work looks at refining how to go from asset level carbon accounting to a product level where information is exchanged at a point of sale between businesses. So how can we bring information to that level so there's an easier action point than a company needing to look at another company's sustainability report and look at that annualized cadence of information. And our role in trying to bring this to light as a nonprofit is through a project called Horizon Zero, which is funded by the Larsen Lamb Climate Foundation and aims to improve greenhouse gas accounting and create a technical architecture to catalyze climate differentiated markets. What is green steel? What does sustainable commodities look like? And how is emissions reporting contributing to climate change? The problems that we faced, we're going to address in 3 main ways. The first via greenhouse gas accounting, which I've touched on. The second being technical architecture, which I'll touch on more in a moment. And the last being around engagement. How can we ensure that the tools that we're developing that are open source and we want to be available to all practitioners are built for use in the systems we're working within. And so that phase 1 on greenhouse gas accounting is how do we apply these principles for consistency across sectors? And these three principles are to use primary data whenever possible and increase the share of it over time, to create bounds for comparison, so we do have apples and oranges in the same emissions perspective, and lastly, to define measurement made for markets. Carbon accounting does not need to be done only for carbon accounting's sake, but how is the emissions reporting that we're doing bringing to light the decarbonization behavior that we need to see in an industrial sector? Phase 2 is a part of what brings us here today. How do we develop a technical architecture for emissions reporting? How do we transform climate disclosures and more comprehensively track and trace emissions through complex supply chains? And digital emissions reporting should be all on one line, but we wanted to do the thought exercise to see if you can piece the words together when they're stacked. But we want them to be verifiable, transparent, secure, comparable, and interoperable, terms that are likely familiar to a bunch of people in this room, and what brings us to our kind of third phase of engagement of how blockchain principles and Web3 can be used in this technical solution, right? And a lot of the principles that Alan laid out in the keynote, again, we are examining here of how they can be secure and verifiable, provide clear provenance and a shared record of truth, and be used to bring this cadence of reporting from a corporate and annualized to a product level and more close to present day or present time emissions reporting. And our work in nonprofits, we have a number of relationships with corporates who are trying to tackle sustainability reporting. We ourselves are not web developers or have been in the technology space for long. We have a 40-year history, and it's mostly around techno-economic analysis in environmental science. So as we are stepping through this project, we're running into challenges and rhetoric that offer some barriers to adoption of Web3 principles in the next generation of emissions reporting. We think these challenges are conquerable, and we're keen to be here this weekend to discuss with experts such as yourselves of how they can be overcome. But first is one that's experienced in many new industries and is client comfort and trust. How can we encourage adoption of a new technology? The second challenge kind of blends with the first in that a lot of sustainability and supply chain solutions that are coming out of the Web3 and blockchain space are crypto and Web3 centric, right? The blockchain space needs to meet corporate sustainability practitioners where they are at. And indeed, some of the best conversations we've had with blockchain traceability companies are not around blockchain, right? It's through the second and third conversation that they are using common sense principles of Web3 in 2022 to meet the needs and the pain points that we see in emissions reporting. And the last challenge we see is a design challenge, right? That also blends with the other two of blockchain and Web3 is not always the best solution, and how it is applied through a process of emissions reporting needs to be thoughtfully done. One that I'm sure many of you all in the audience have been actively thinking about.
And with that, now that Charles has gone kind of through the opportunities we see with blockchain, but also some of the challenges, I kind of wanted to summarize what are we really looking for? And when we think of blockchain, what are some of the questions we're asking ourselves? When we work with the industrial actors, with those companies, we really want to make sure that we solve the problems that they have when it comes to GHG accounting in the most efficient way, rather than trying to push on them a certain technology. We really want to look at the root issues, the root causes, and the problems that they're facing, and design a solution that solves it effectively and efficiently with the right technology, and rather than putting the technology first. We also know that these actors we're working with, they're busy, they have their own priorities, business priorities. Environmental reporting, sustainability is just one of the things that they have on their plates. So we kind of want to meet them where they are. meet them with their level of understanding, with the resources that they have, the incentives that they have in front of them. And rather than kind of expecting them to come to a certain solution, certain technology is kind of pre-baked for them. And thirdly, what's in a way almost the most important to us is that whatever technical solutions we help put out there and design and propose, we want them to be interoperable, because there's one option of solving a particular reporting issue for a specific company with a customized solution. But if that solution doesn't speak to another one, then we're really not solving the issue holistically for the whole sector and for the whole ecosystem. So interoperability is something that is really, really important for us. So in kind of closing, as we are here talking to you and hopefully connecting more over the next day or two, we wanted to outline some of the things that we're looking for and would welcome feedback from this audience and for this pretty diverse group of people here. First, we're looking for examples where blockchain has been applied to solve sustainability challenges, and especially in the industrial sectors, in the hard-to-abate sectors. We would love to hear kind of lessons learned, what has worked, what we can improve going forward. So some real examples are very much welcome. As Charles mentioned, we're having conversations with a lot of actors, including technical solutions providers. And really what we are keen to find is kind of openness to sort of design fit-for-purpose solutions. What I mean by that, as I said earlier, we want to find efficient ways of solving this problem and meet our clients where they are. So we're looking for really kind of solutions that meet this purpose. And as Charles said, we're a nonprofit. We're looking to solve this pretty big, major issue. And what we want to put out there are solutions that kind of serve the public good, that are open source, that can be used by everyone, that can be, really applied across the sector, across the whole ecosystem. So that is the vision that we have. That's what we're working on. We welcome feedback on that. Thank you for listening to us.
Thanks all.
Thank you.